Tonight on World News, bad to worse. That nationwide egg recall, already the largest in 20 years, explodes. Tonight, where authorities are most concerned. Shrinking savings, a startling new number. Americans taking a bold step with their 401ks. The president's faith, a famous evangelist jumps in saying President Obama was born a Muslim. White House reacts tonight. One-on-one, Rod Blagojevich and our Brian Ross. The profanity, the audio tapes, and the question that brought him to tears. And captured after 3 weeks on the run, the modern-day Bonnie and Clyde caught. And you won't believe the slip-up.
From ABC News headquarters, this is ABC World News with Diane Sawyer. Reporting tonight, David Muir.
Good evening. That massive egg recall we've been reporting on here is widening tonight. In fact, a new number just in, now more than 500 million eggs pulled from shelves. Federal authorities now say they've learned of a second major farm where the eggs were tainted with salmonella. Those same authorities now say the number of Americans getting sick from eating tainted eggs will almost certainly grow. David Wright is on the story again tonight.
As if the recall of 380 million eggs potentially infected with salmonella weren't troubling enough, today's developments mean an entirely different producer has also unwittingly been distributing poisoned eggs.
My guess is the investigation is nowhere near complete. That there's a possibility that this contamination could have spread to many farms.
The second company is Hillendale Farms of New Hampton, Iowa. Lab tests from 2 of its plants confirmed that eggs had been contaminated with salmonella bacteria. Those eggs are sold under the brand names Hillendale Farms, Sunny Farms, and Sunny Meadow, and distributed to grocery wholesalers in 14 states.
Whenever you have these sorts of huge multi-state outbreaks, you're putting at risk senior citizens, the very young. Millions of Americans can be at risk.
Hillendale is just 100 miles away from Wright County Egg in Galt, Iowa, and there are business ties between the two companies. Salmonella tends to spread through unsanitary conditions. This is hidden camera footage taken by an animal rights organization at a hen house in Maine that's owned and operated by the family that owns Wright County Egg.
You can see the flies. Our investigator saw a lot of insects, flies, and rodents.
Critics say it's likely not the case. There are just a few rotten eggs in the poultry business. Conditions like these are fairly common. The FDA is casting a wide net in its investigation, but for now focusing on just these 2 companies. And FDA officials tell ABC News they're focusing on the possibility that these 2 companies may have shared common feed or poultry sources, and that may have infected both companies with salmonella. David?
All right, David Wright starting us off tonight. Thank you. And of course, if you're worried about the eggs in your refrigerator, we put the full list of recalled brands and numbers on our website, abcnews.com. Simply click on World News with Diane Sawyer. And from worries about food to how to pay for it, tonight a troubling new sign of just how far Americans are going to simply make ends meet. There was word today of a record number of people making what are called hardship withdrawals from their 401ks. Tonight, the risky trend, and we ask, why have so many companies now sitting on near record profits stopped contributing to those 401ks? Here's Bianca Goladriga.
It's a decision 48-year-old Robert Mathis is still paying for. Over a year ago, the longtime AAA employee tapped into his retirement account for a loan.
My job at that time required me traveling a lot, and I needed to buy a new car.
But just days later, Robert lost his job, which meant that his loan was immediately treated as a withdrawal, triggering heavy penalties.
My goal wasn't to get rid of it completely, but as time went by, I just needed the money to survive.
And he's not alone. New data from the nation's largest retirement savings company shows that nearly 1 in 4 workers has taken out a loan against their 401k plan, a 10-year high.
Individuals are finding in these tough economic times that they need to access their savings, and for many individuals, their primary savings vehicle is their retirement savings plan.
Even more troubling, Fidelity has also seen a spike in hardship withdrawals from their retirement plans. Special emergency distributions only allowed to keep families out of foreclosure, pay medical bills, or fund college tuition.
It's always unfortunate when a young person takes money out of the plan, because they not only have to pay the taxes and penalties, which can be quite severe, but they lose that long-term compounding effect, which can have multiple effects on their retirements.
And in a sort of double punch, during the height of the recession, we heard of so many companies that stopped contributing to these 401ks, and yet The profits have returned for so many of them. Why haven't the contributions?
Well, the good news is that 75% of all companies that were matching and contributing to their 401k plans before the recession began continue to do so. Of those that stopped, a third have now resumed, but that's still not at a fast enough pace. And a lot of these CEOs are saying they're still uncertain about where this economy will end up, even if they are sitting on a lot of cash right now.
All right, Bianca Goldadriga tonight. We'll see you tomorrow morning on GMA. We're going to turn now to Washington and all of this talk about President Obama's faith. It was just yesterday the White House again stressed that President Obama is a Christian. But tonight, one of this country's best-known evangelical leaders has now entered the fray, adding to those new poll numbers showing a growing number of Americans, now 18%, think the president is a Muslim. And so we turn to Jake Tapper on Martha's Vineyard, where the president and his family are on vacation. Jake, how's the White House responding?
Well, David, not only is the number of Americans who mistakenly believe the president to be a Muslim growing, but now almost half of the American people say they don't know what religion the president is. The president's religion and the vast misperception of it is now a topic of theological discussion. The Reverend Franklin Graham told CNN his theory as to why there's confusion.
He was born a Muslim. His father was a Muslim. The seed of Islam has passed through the father. He has renounced Islam and he has accepted Jesus Christ.
Franklin Graham is certainly entitled to his opinion.
It all has the White House a bit confused. The president has repeatedly said he has always been a Christian.
You know, the president is a committed Christian. I think that the American people know that.
But actually, polls indicate the American people do not know that, despite tremendous efforts to discuss his Christian beliefs, going into more detail than many of his predecessors, such as his address on Easter.
What I can do is tell you what draws me to this holy day, and what lesson I take from Christ's sacrifice, and what inspires me about the story of the resurrection.
When a man says, I am a Christian, who are we to say he's not? This is just incredibly unbelievable to me.
Democrats blame widely circulated conspiratorial emails and false reports in the media. Those reports, Democrats say, have combined with Muslim roots on the president's father's side, an exotic name, and political enemies emphasizing his otherness.
Barack Hussein Obama.
Psychology professor Art Markman says other forces are at play, including overall disapproval of the job the president is doing.
The more that people feel as though the president is not someone who stands with them, the more that they may be inclined to consider him to be different from themselves.
And David, some political observers say the confusion is compounded by the fact that the president has yet to pick a congregation in Washington, D.C. with whom to pray. The White House says that's because the president doesn't want to inconvenience other parishioners with the added presence of security and the media. They say the president prays privately every day to Jesus. David.
Jake Tapper, thank you. And Jake, as you know, while on Martha's Vineyard, the president is getting updates on the crisis in Pakistan. And it was from that country today we got a dramatic picture of U.S. efforts to reach victims, now nearly a month into this, who are just now getting help. Our Lama Hassan was up in the air with the U.S. Marines trying to beat the odds tonight.
We've been with the military all day picking up sacks of rice and flour and delivering it to the most remote areas in the northern part of the country. And they say today was a good day. They delivered 13 tons of aid.
We flew with U.S. Marines high above the region where the floods first hit. Helicopters are the only way to reach the desperate. Bridges and roads washed away. The Marines tell us this is the worst destruction they've ever seen. They evacuate everyone they can, more than 5,000 victims so far, including those lifted to safety today. Malik Firdos told me he and his family have been eating grass to survive. Now he's leaving them, taking a chopper ride, promising to return with food. Dramatic evacuations and aid drops work when the weather holds, and today, mercifully, it did. But no matter how often they fly, the Marines cannot reach everyone. As we left up on the hill, we saw families still waiting for help. Lama Hassan, ABC News, Swat Valley, Pakistan.
We're going to turn now to the Middle East and to a high-stakes invitation that's now been accepted tonight. Secretary Clinton has formally asked Israeli and Palestinian leaders to come to Washington to restart the peace talks. They have said yes, but Martha Raddatz, we have heard this before, so we ask you tonight, what's different this time?
Well, David, that question was asked again and again today at the State Department, and Mideast Special Envoy George Mitchell said, "We will only know the answer when it is completed." Now, that doesn't give you a whole lot of confidence, but Hillary Clinton seemed confident today that a peace agreement can be wrapped up in 1 year. I couldn't help remembering that George Bush thought the same thing back in January 2008, and less than a year later, there was the war in Gaza. And I'll tell you, David, that already today there's been some controversy before the talks even start, with the Palestinians warning they will pull out of the talks if the Israelis announce new settlement building. But as George Mitchell also said today, past efforts at peace that did not succeed cannot deter us from trying again. And that they will do, David.
All right, Martha Raddatz, who covers foreign affairs. Martha, thank you. And in the long struggle to find peace in Iraq, a monumental moment. We watched this week the last U.S. combat brigade roll over back across the border into Kuwait. But tonight, could the Iraqis, so many of whom for so long wanted the U.S. out, now want us to wait? Our Dan Harris is in Baghdad tonight.
Tonight at Baghdad's fanciest new restaurant, after the obligatory weapons search, Iraqis sat down to break the Ramadan fast and to talk about the U.S. combat brigades pulling out. Surprisingly, it makes them nervous.
Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that the Americans are pulling out?
No?
Yeah.
It's a bad decision. Out on the streets today, we heard the same thing.
We don't know what could happen when they leave.
There is an extraordinary irony at work here. Over 7.5 years of coming to Iraq, I've seen the Americans criticized at every turn. From before the war, during the days of Saddam, to the early days of the insurgency in 2003, when this mother, angry about the lack of security, issued this dark warning.
So many Americans will be killed, I can assure you, because I know my people.
But right now, Iraq is at a particularly fragile stage. More than 5 months after national elections here, rival politicians still haven't been able to form a government. Insurgents are starting to fill the power vacuum. Just today, Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for a suicide attack on young army recruits the other day that killed nearly 50 people.
The Americans, they start a job in Iraq, and suddenly they leave, and they leave in a very bad timing.
Make no mistake, Iraqis still want us gone, just not yet. Dan Harris, ABC News, Baghdad.
And back here at home tonight, two major newspapers are now coming to former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich's defense. The Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post are both criticizing government prosecutors in the case. And after keeping his lips sealed in court, the former governor, convicted of only one of 24 counts against him, sat down with our Brian Ross today.
Hi, how are you? The former Illinois governor came to New York today to launch a media campaign against the chief federal prosecutor in his case.
This is a prosecutor who has become a persecutor, is determined to get his trophy, to make a name for himself.
Blagojevich is talking about Chicago U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, who announced the governor's arrest in December 2008 with great fanfare.
The conduct would make Lincoln roll over in his grave.
But behind the scenes, Blagojevich told ABC News, FBI agents attempted without success to flip him, to offer him a deal if he would testify against higher-ups in Illinois politics.
They were very clear about how they wanted me to cooperate and talk about people in higher places. And without getting specific, there aren't a lot of positions higher than governor.
Was it your impression they were thinking of Obama?
I think that's the sort of thing that I should probably keep to myself for now.
Blagojevich also responded directly to the secretly recorded FBI tapes, on which he talks about getting a job or campaign contributions in exchange for the vacant U.S. Senate seat of Barack Obama.
You know what I mean? I mean, I've got this thing, and it's golden, and I'm just not giving it up for nothing.
Politics and routine politics and political horse trading and discussing what may or may not be available is how the business works.
You think that's just routine politics?
Absolutely.
Blagojevich says even though he has no money left to pay for defense lawyers, he is ready to go to trial a second time, more optimistic than ever, he says, of a future not behind bars.
You sometimes have to take a deep breath and realize the blessings that you have. And, I've been blessed with a wonderful wife, and
can you imagine ever being in politics again?
If she's watching this show, the answer would be no. But if she's not, no, I'm not ruling out. I'm not ruling out doing something I spent my whole adult life doing.
The former governor with our Brian Ross.